So I was on a construction crew, and we were getting ready to pour a driveway and concrete down there in Fort Smith. And my agent calls me. He's like, "Hey, the Packers want you to come work out." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "Yeah, their guy got hurt. They're bringing you and 2 other guys for the start of next week is Monday Night Football, the first game." So I was like, "Oh, here we go."
Did you say, "Let me finish this driveway"?
No, I took my tool belt off and said, "Hey, I'll see y'all later. I'm getting out of here."
Welcome into the Hog Pod. I'm Bo Mattingly, and this episode is made possible by our friends at First Security Bank, Saracen Resort, Abuelita Maria, and South by Northwest Hospitality. According to the NCAA, only 3% of high school football players make it to Division I, and of those players, less than 2% make it to the NFL. Getting there is hard enough, but when it's only one spot at your position for each team, it's even harder.
There's 32.
Yeah.
They're not keeping them on the practice squad.
If they get them, those are the longevity jobs.
Correct.
So how did Brett Good go from snapping against the goalpost in high school to walking on at Arkansas, then lasting a decade in the NFL and winning a Super Bowl?
The final snap of Super Bowl 45. The Green Bay Packers have won the Super Bowl.
To him, it was just hard work and determination to live out a lifelong dream. And along the way, he got to be part of some incredible Arkansas moments.
I mean, we had everybody. My first year, we're playing Tony Bua and all those guys. Going in my senior year, we get College Game Day. Obviously, we know the Heisman deal with McFadden. So you've got a lot of media that's on those guys. So it's just part of it.
Good's time with the Hogs helped them prepare for the NFL spotlight when he debuted on Monday Night Football with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers.
You don't know how long you're going to make it at that point, but at that moment, you're like, I'm here. I'm getting to live my childhood dream of playing on Monday Night Football.
It's a storybook career for a guy who found his niche in high school and then just kept working until his dream became a reality. What's the transition like for an NFL player to re-enter the real world? If you think about it, you really haven't ever been in the real world as an adult, right? You go to high school, to college, you're in the NFL. And that's got to be an interesting transition.
It is. And I actually had this conversation with my wife. It's like my adult life has been away, and it's been in the professional, college ranks or professional football ranks. So you really are like, what if? What do I do? Where am I going to go? How am I going to do this? It was never an issue of getting up. I've always been driven to get up and do stuff, but it was what's going to be the next step? How are you going to make that process? Because you don't know. They always told us that in the NFL. We always had meetings like, the NFL stands for not for long. Like your next time, you're going to have another career. What are you going to do? And you always think it's not going to be me. So I took three years off and really to figure that out. Now I wanted the time off to spend with my young kids too, that a lot of dads don't get to. But it really allowed me to transition a lot better than some guys do.
Was it a big difference just going to work, getting a job, doing things that everyone else has been doing for a while?
I think the transition was the commitment to knowing that, hey, I'm actually committed to this other company now. I was always committed to the NFL. I was, committed in the offseason when nobody's looking, you're working out. And now you're doing that here. You're working late hours. You're doing things that nobody's looking. And I think that's how you get ahead in life. It's not just the 9 to 5. It's what are you doing, at night to your body, keeping your health up, but also what are you doing to learn? So I'm trying to always educate myself on the new gig and trying to make sure that I'm able to go in front of people and talk. And that was kind of how I fell into this role. Is I wanted to be able to go around and get as close to that locker room as I could. That was the thing that I missed the most, was talking to all the guys and having that relationship. Well, now I get to go talk to a bunch of different people that I don't know, and so I'm not nervous going in to talk to them. You just kind of open up the conversation and you just be yourself. And I think that's the big key.
I think your story is remarkable because you didn't really have a spot in college and you figured out a spot. You didn't really have a spot to go play beyond college, and you didn't just figure out a spot. You figured out a spot for a decade and made, significant money playing in the NFL. And I want to talk about how you got there. So let's back up and tell me what growing up was like. What kind of athlete you were? Were you a big football dreamer? What was life like as a kid?
So I grew up, Emmitt Smith, all those guys are, they're huge. They're winning Super Bowls. So I was a Dallas fan. That was before you could watch every game. So in Arkansas, we got Dallas for the Chiefs. So we were watching them. I played running back in Little League. And then as I kind of transitioned into junior high, I got slower. So I transitioned into linebacker and eventually got into offensive line as I got into high school. But on the junior high team, I wasn't big enough at that point. I hadn't hit my growth spurt to fill out, and so they needed a snapper. And so I was like, I'll do it. I'll volunteer, do it, and you start practicing, and it became something that I did every day. And I think that's kind of the transition. If it plays out through college the same way, is didn't think I was really going to get to go to college, and then all of a sudden, they start talking to you. And then after college was over, you thought your career was over. That Wisconsin game down there in Florida, I really thought everything was done. We didn't have, when I was playing, the snappers didn't have ratings. There was no snapper camps that all these guys are looking at now, so you had no clue what was going on. And then after the game, a week later, Houston came up to me and was like, "You're on the Senior Bowl." So it just kind of, every step just kind of kept happening. But the whole process was just keep your head down to the grind and just try and do your job as best you can.
Bauer on to punt again to Deshaun Jameson. Jameson, 2 kickoff return touchdowns, 1 punt return touchdown in his great career.
So let's talk about what a deep snapper looks like back then. You're specializing in this in high school?
Yes. I mean, I was.
You're not the center. You're just.
I was playing offensive line. I was the center for 2 years.
Okay.
But my deal was snapping. Like at that point, I started getting recruited a little bit, and so. My focus was on that, but then again, my focus was on being center. So it was just trying to maintain that, and you had to do a lot of practice, before and after. You on the football field, high schools, they don't spend a lot of time on special teams. So you've got to really take ownership of it and do a lot of stuff, again, when nobody's looking, just on your own, and you're just snapping balls.
Did you have a dream, a goal, or were you just trying to make it right then?
When I was younger, I actually had this career teacher in junior high that I wrote on there I wanted to play in the NFL. And she said I was the only student that ever did that.
But this is before snapping.
This is before snapping came.
Like when you thought you were white lightning.
As you're playing, but as you're playing, you're like, is there a chance I can go to college? And you don't really know it's an opportunity until you start getting a letter. And then, the coaches kind of start calling and everything. You weren't doing a ton of text messaging then. There wasn't social media that you were going through, so the process was slower. You didn't really know what everybody was thinking. And to this day, I don't think, even through the NFL, you don't know what the scouts are thinking, what the GM's thinking. I got told one time that, hey, you're doing a really good job, and the next day I was cut. That was down in Jacksonville. So, you really don't know where you stand, where you're going to go, and it's just a week-to-week deal, and I think that's kind of the process that I've always been in.
Yeah, so when did you start thinking about college and playing football in college?
My senior year. When I started getting recruited, junior year, senior year, it kind of became real when I got invited to come up to this camp. I had just had my appendix taken out, which was kind of crazy. So I was like, I can't go through the drills, but I can snap. And so I probably was against doctor's orders, but I was like, I wanted to snap. So I got to snap in front of Houston. And then things kind of just progressed from there. And I was like, okay, this is a reality. And being from Arkansas, my dream was to play for the Hogs. I had some other opportunities, some smaller schools, but if the Hogs ever came up, I was going to take that opportunity.
Now, that's important, but are schools burning up scholarships on deep snappers?
Then no. Now they're starting to because they're realizing the importance of it. Teams are losing games from a snapper. And it's not the snapper's fault. It's just they didn't really know what they were getting into. And you don't really have a specialized coach either. When you go to the college and the NFL, there's not snapping coaches. And so you have to really know what you're doing. And if something kind of gets messed up, you got to know how to fix it in a hurry.
And it's over his head. And he throws it out of the end zone. And it's going to be.
So how did you learn that? What was the thing that got you to where you were really working on this technique that you didn't even really know? How did all that happen?
Benji Mahan, former Razorback. He was down there in Fort Smith and kind of took me under his wing and started teaching me the right techniques. And you just kind of take those techniques and try and perfect them the best you can. So there was a lot of practice and a lot of movement of studying yourself along the way.
What's practicing snapping look like?
So in high school, I was snapping against the goalpost. You know, you're sitting there and you walk out and you just try and hit the goalpost. And I'd have a little mark there and say, okay, I'm going to hit between this range for a punt, and then you get closer for a field goal, and I'd put a piece of tape there, and that's what you're trying to hit. You have an aiming point.
How were you doing?
Did well. I did
hitting that post a lot?
Did fairly well. And I actually heard rumors, you know, when they were recruiting Matt Jones there at Northside, that they were coming by and they could see me hitting the pole, and that, you know, that kind of gains attention. And when you see somebody snapping that far and being consistent with it, and that's all I tried to be, was consistent.
Did you have anybody rebounding for you?
Not a lot. I did have, you know, as I got older, my brother would catch for me, and I'd be like, hey, let's go out in the yard, let me snap. And that's kind of what you did. But even as I moved on to professional, I actually had a net made, and just snap into the net, walk down there and get it. And it kind of helps you not over snap either. I mean, you can definitely overdo it and get yourself into some wrong techniques. So it's just kind of take your time, because it's a long practice. You know, when you're just a snapper, you can't just snap all practice. A lot of people say that about kickers. You know, they should be kicking the whole time. Your body can't take it. So you have to do a lot of mental preparation. Then you work on, you know, footwork and do a lot of drills and stuff along. That's
a great point, because if you think about that 10,000 hour rule Malcolm Gladwell introduced, or just any number of reps that gets you to a certain point, like a lot of people, that's what we do. We just got to get those reps in. You can't overdo the reps.
Right.
How do you compensate for that? It's just making sure you're perfecting how you're doing each rep.
Exactly.
Is that it?
That's it. And your mind, it takes some time. I mean, you didn't perfect it. You know, as I got older, I got better at it as well. But you figure out what your body needs. You figure out your aches and pains, your soreness along the way of where you are during the season, of what you need to be for game day. You know, it's different than off season. Off season, you can really go at it, but during, you know, game week, you're really making sure that you're honing in on that and not wearing yourself out. Because you think of a game day, you go in and you probably snap more on a game day in pregame than you do in practice, you know, in reps. And then you have to stay loose the entire game. So I'm snapping the entire game, you know, on first and second down when the offense has the ball. And it's just trying to get in that repetition of saying, okay, I only need 2 balls here. You know, we're going to go out here, and then if there's a 2-minute timeout or something like that, and it's a long wait TV timeout, you go snap one more. You know, just trying to stay ready, but not overdoing it through that process.
So Arkansas sees you. They like you. Hey, what did they say?
Say, hey, we want you to walk on. You know, we don't have a scholarship at this time, but we want you to walk on, and we think you can eventually earn a scholarship.
What's a Houston Nutt recruiting speech like to a walk-on deep snapper?
To me, it feels like it's the same. I mean, it's his same personality. You know, that's the great thing about Houston is I don't think he changes for anybody. Or you can see him on TV now. He still has that same fire in him.
But hey, is that the best we can do? No. We're going to get better and better. Every week. All we got to do is hit that line.
And it was that same fire that, you know, when you're sitting in his office, talking to him when he came to the house there, you know, that fire that you want to be a Razorback. And he was truthful. He said, hey, you have an opportunity to earn a starting job. You got to come in here and earn it. And luckily I was able to do that.
So you walk on, then what happens?
Walk on, and it took me a little bit on the education-wise. I had to take a couple of classes down there at UA Fort Smith, and just to get in. So I got into the 105, which was huge. You know, you invited to walk onto the 105 is a big deal. And about 2 weeks in, I earned the starting job on the punt. I wasn't big enough for the field goal, so I didn't do that my first year, and then I kind of took that over my second year throughout the rest of my career.
How much bigger did you have to get?
I graduated high school at 195. When I got to Arkansas, I was 205, and then by the time I graduated, I was to about 230. So it was just kind of trying to gain weight the whole time. You try and do it the right way, too.
What are the rules on a deep snapper and what the defense is allowed or not allowed to do?
Then there was nothing. Then there was a lot of lining up and just running right over the snapper. They didn't really change that rule, I think, until my 7th year in the NFL, where you actually had to get outside the box.
You can't line up over the center.
You can't line up over the center anymore. So they've changed that to try and protect a lot of centers. And that was the deal about the NFL is like gain weight. You know, gain weight because those guys are going to line up. And it's not just one. They used to stack 2 guys and then have 2 pushers. And they was just trying to run you over. And it's not necessarily to block the kick, it's to get in your head. And you know, you're thinking about them hitting you instead of snapping the ball, and you've got to just focus, be like, okay, I'm fixing to take a big hit, but I've got to get this ball back there.
That's something that you don't see, like when they ran that old segment on SportsCenter or whatever NFL show on ESPN where you just got jacked up, you know, like somebody a big hit. They didn't show that one where the center just gets knocked on his butt on special teams every play.
Every play.
And I don't think people realize that. What's that
So
like?
I got made fun of a lot from the defensive lineman because I had grass stains on my butt. And so I'm like, I can't help it. But it's really, you're trying to create a wall there and you're just grabbing grass. But you can't grab too much because you don't get stepped on. Cleats are coming through, so you got to be careful there. And you're just taking it. You're realizing that the field goal operation's under 1.3 seconds, and you just got to take it and get up and do it again. And I can still do the splits. I got into a lot of flexibility just because your body gets put in positions that you're not used to. I've actually showed my wife, and my kids aren't ready yet to see it, but I've got some old tape where your neck gets put in positions that you didn't think was normal, but it's just part of the process of what goes on that game day.
There's a lot to love about Arkansas, and First Security Bank knows it. The natural state has been their home since 1932. Since then, First Security has expanded around the state, helping all Arkansans bank better. They invest in their home, and because they're only in Arkansas, they're investing in our homes too, communities, families, and local businesses. They're proud of their home state and proud to be only in Arkansas. Check out fsbank.com and find out about all the ways First Security Bank can help you bank better. First Security Bank, only in Arkansas. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Support for the Hog Pod comes from South by Northwest Hospitality, owners of Theo's, Eastside Grill, and Southern Food Company. They've got you covered in every direction. Whether you're visiting the northern edges of Northwest Arkansas or knocking around East or West Fayetteville, you can grab an Onyx coffee, a late-night drink, or some of the best food around. Whichever way your compass points, join us at Theo's, Eastside Grill, or the Southern Food Company.
Growing up in Arkansas, I loved the Razorbacks. Still do. I wanted to always play for them. I never thought I had the chance until I started getting recruited by Houston Nutt.
You come to Arkansas. You eventually worked your way on scholarship, right?
Yes, after my second year.
Was it a surprise?
I was hoping for. I mean, it's always a surprise when it finally comes through, but you're always hopeful. It's like, okay, I'm in year two. I've been starting for 2 years. I think I've earned it, and luckily that came true.
And are you thinking NFL at this point?
No, you don't hear anything. There's no conversation. There's nothing going on. So you're just thinking it's all Arkansas. It's all just trying to get better and trying to keep my position and keep my starting job.
By the way, let's remind people of the teams you run. You run some pretty good teams at Arkansas, right?
We had some good teams, especially my first and my senior year. The 2 years in between, we had a couple losing seasons, but we had some good teams.
Watch out! He's gone! I think.
On the end around, this is Jones, and Jones has some real estate ahead of him. Felix Jones telling everyone to look at his shoe bottoms. Touchdown, Razorbacks!
And off Hillis. Peyton Hillis being chased but will not be caught. 65-yard touchdown.
McFadden.
We had McFadden,
Felix.
Peyton, Felix. We had Sam, Butu. I mean, we had everybody. My first year, we were playing Tony Bua and all those guys.
These are all the guys that people are talking about.
Yes, everybody's talking about them, rightfully so. I mean, you've got guys that are up for different awards and accolades throughout the whole process. And going in my senior year, we get College Game Day. Obviously, we know the Heisman deal with McFadden, so you've got a lot of media that's on those guys. So it's just part of it.
And just to flash ahead for a second, how many of those guys lasted as long as you did in the NFL?
There are very few. I think Jason Peters, he's still playing.
Yeah.
So he was my first year, but he's still going. So it's, it truly is a blessing to know that you get to play 10 years because you see guys touted as many accolades, as many awards that they've gotten, depending on what team they go to or injury, they kind of get out of the league.
So you're doing great in college. Your deep snap, everything's great, but you're still not getting recognition. You're not getting these scouts coming in and talking to you about being in the NFL. And you're thinking your career is going to end at what's now the Capital One Bowl in Orlando, Wisconsin, Arkansas game. You got nothing. I mean, what are you thinking is happening from that point forward? You're going to finish school up?
Finish school and go be a coach. I mean, that was my plan is just, hey, I'm going to go in my spring semester here, and we're going to go coach, try and find a job somewhere and just get into the real world. Because, I mean, to that point, I had heard nothing. And literally the next week we're going to clean out the locker, and they're like, hey, go see Coach Nutt. He wants to talk to you. And then that's kind of when everything started.
And what did he say?
He's like, hey, you're going to be one of the first 2 snappers to ever invited to the Senior Bowl. I was like, whoa, they don't take snappers. Like they're starting to now, and you're going to be one of them. It's me and a guy from Virginia Tech. And so, Virginia Tech at the time, obviously Beamer ball and everything, being a specialist, you're like, okay, this is highly touted. So you go down there and, you're standing in front of 400 scouts. And it's the first time that I was ever introduced to that world that is the crazy world of the NFL, where they are really picking apart everything they can.
So at the Senior Bowl, they have this day where you do a weigh-in, you get up in front of like 300 scouts and GMs and whatever in your underwear. Mm-hmm. How'd you feel about yourself right then?
It was interesting. And it's not even just getting up there, you're waiting in line. So you're pretty much naked. You're in your underwear, you're walking across, and they do your hands. They're just yelling out measurements. You step on the scale, they yell out measurements, and that's all they're doing. They get up there and you just take a picture. There's no interview. It's see your body and then move on.
This is what a deep snapper looks like.
This is what it looks like, yes.
You got like the best athletes in the world around you.
Yes.
You're like,
everybody's looking at me. He's like, oh.
Here in my underwear. Like,
ate some mashed potatoes last night, didn't you? I was like, yeah, I did. I like them.
That's awesome. So at this point, what are you thinking about what's next?
Well, it's crazy at the Senior Bowl because everything's thrown at you. You have agents coming at you. So I'm like, slow down. I want to figure out what's going on. I want to make sure that, I'm not old enough to really know what's going on in that. So I want to make sure I can bring my family involved. Like, let's go through this process. So we reached out to a couple of people to find my agent. His name's Kevin Gold, and he really was snappers. He did a couple of other guys, and he's done some other sports along the way, but his deal is snappers. He has a website for snappers, and I was like, okay, let's go to him. So we met him in Dallas, ended up signing, and then at that point it's just, hey, we're going to send your tape out to all these guys and just keep doing it and get ready for pro day.
So now you're thinking this is a real thing.
Yeah.
But you still don't know if you're going to make a team, get drafted, whatever.
Don't have a clue. You're just getting ready for pro day. It's like, okay, what are my numbers be? I've never. There's not a number for snappers for bench press. It's like, what do I need to get to? What do I need to push for, and what's my my L drill and 40. At pro day, what do I need to have? And so he's breaking down, kind of what snappers need to be at that point. And so I just tried to get as close as I could to that.
Are you thinking this is a big deal? And is there any anxiety? Because I can make the NFL. I didn't even realize that was a thing. It's huge. It's kind of like, I might win the lottery, I might not, but this is a real chance. What's going through your head in this build-up to whether you are actually going to make it to the NFL?
Honestly, it was the same build-up that my whole career is. Just focus on doing your job and do the best you can. I mean, I really had that mindset and carried it on. It's like, hey, I won't have any regrets if I go out there. I've done the right things behind the scenes. I've done the right things in front, and that's all. I can't control what they're going to pick, but I can control what I do.
Where'd that come from? How you grew up, how you were raised?
I think it's how I grew up, a little bit of combination of everything. How I grew up, how I was raised, watching other people. I love to still watch people. You figure out, you see people make mistakes, and it's not that you wish them to make mistakes, but you see how they react to them, because we all screw up, and it's how how that next step is. And you see guys that the decisions they made have got them out. There was guys that didn't play college football anymore, not because of injury, but just because their head wasn't in it. And you have a lot of those issues that I think we still see today, where I think there's a big reason sports psychologists are in it, to try and help athletes out to get over that, because you've got to juggle everything. Not only are you juggling, in college, you're juggling football, but you're juggling school plus your family life of, who's going to come to the game. A lot of things you got to think of, and then it just kind of transitions on to the NFL. Is the same process where you really got to take that into consideration.
What was your family life like? What'd you learn from your home life?
It was good. So my dad was in construction. My mom was a school teacher, and so we started on the construction crew about 14, picking up trash, and it's a humbling experience. So you're just going around picking up all day, and it's hot in the summers, and you do it though. And I always was a saver of money, so every time I got a paycheck, it was save as much as I could, because I wanted the big thing. I didn't want a bunch of little things. I wanted to save up for a nice pair of boots or a nice car or something along the way, and that mindset just kind of continued on.
All right, so this process leading up to the NFL, the draft happens. You don't get drafted. You're probably not really expecting to get drafted.
So at that time, I was talking to Jacksonville, and there was a chance in the 6th round. They had a compensatory pick there, and I thought there might be a chance. Well, they called me that another guy came available, and they ended up drafting him. But they said, we still want to sign you to an undrafted free agent. So at that point, you kind of watch the 7th round, and then you start getting a couple of phone calls. And I'd had communication with Joe DeCamillis down there at Jacksonville, and I was like, okay, I've had the most conversation with him. So this might be my best opportunity, so let's go there. So I got a $5,000 signing bonus and basically headed down to Jacksonville.
And what happened?
Did good, I thought. I mean, I was there for all the off season, got through mini camp, went all the way into training camp, and everything was going good. And we were actually getting ready for the next preseason game, which was going to be in Lambeau Field. And I was excited. I was like, hey, I get to go to Lambeau Field. Played a football game, and literally a couple days before that I got cut. And so you drive, I think it's 16, 17 hours back, and you're thinking, okay, what's next? And you talk to your family, you talk to your agent, but you get a lot of time to think on your own of where's this going to take me. And I think I just came back and said, okay, stay ready. You never know if somebody gets hurt. Go through this whole process because, again, like we talked before, I didn't want to not do my part if that opportunity came up.
So you're home. You don't know what's going to happen.
No clue. No clue. You're sitting there waiting. I did a couple of workouts for guys. Emergency situation, somebody gets hurt during the season. Traveled around probably 4 teams that year. Just did some snapping on a Tuesday. Everything was on a Tuesday.
Are you working on the side?
Working on the side, doing construction on the side. Just going on the construction crew, just working.
Watching the
football.
Game at Buffalo Wild Wings on Sundays with your buddies. Just a normal guy, just having a beer, watching the game. Just it just relaxing. I mean, and that's the fun part of it. Is, it's still relaxing to me to watch football, but it was a little more intense there. You're like, what's happening? You kind of pick things apart. If somebody messed up or they get hurt, you're like, okay, can I get a call? But nothing happened that year. So you go the whole season.
Go the whole season.
Construction
NFL
the whole season.
NFL Sundays, normal,
wherever you wanted to watch it.
A normal human being.
Yeah.
Kind of transition in 2008. Kind of sit down and be like, okay, what am I going to do? And Jacksonville calls. And so I was like, okay, we'll go down there again. So I went down there again, and I get cut at minicamp. So I get cut earlier, this time in June. And it's like, okay, maybe this isn't going to happen. So you have to drive that whole drive back, and you get back and you're like, hey, what if? What's the process? How long am I going to go into this? Because, it takes time to get in. Unless you're drafted in early rounds, you look at a lot of kickers and specialists. That's the process. A lot of guys get out of the league from injury into age.
Well, there's only
there's 32.
Really limited number of spots. Yeah,
there's 32.
Yeah,
and then they're not keeping them on the practice squad.
If they get them, those are the longevity jobs.
Correct. I mean, quarterback, kicker, punter, snapper. I mean, if you can do your job, you can be there for a while.
So there's not a lot of turnover, not a lot of jobs opening up each year. So this is actually interesting of how you just kind of hang around. Maybe you'll get a chance.
And that's what you do. You have to sit there and just be consistent on your workouts, be ready to go. Because if you get that opportunity, it might be your only one. All the other teams know when you go work out somewhere, but it doesn't mean they're going to call you. So, I get cut from Jacksonville, and then I heard nothing. Training camp came, no calls, literally heard nothing. So I was on a construction crew, and we were getting ready to pour a driveway in concrete down there in Fort Smith. And my agent calls me. He's like, "Hey, Packers want you to come work out." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "Yeah, their guy got hurt in the last preseason game. They're bringing you and 2 other guys for the start of next week is Monday Night Football, the first game." So I was like, "Oh, here we go."
Did you say, let me finish this driveway?
No, I took my tool belt off and said, "Hey, I'll see y'all later. I'm getting out of here. I got to go catch a plane." They all understood.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, you have to. I mean, at that point, you're like, I got to get ready. And I had been snapping the whole time, but the get ready was pack a bag. And you're not only packing a bag for a 2-day workout, you're hoping that you're going to be there for longer. And got up there, and again, you don't know how you're doing. I was there with 2 other guys. Snap, run. We're running down the field, and next thing you know, they come in there and just say, "Hey, we're going to go with you."
Man, are you kind of disappointed that you didn't put your initials in that concrete driveway before you left?
Fun, yes.
Just go back, and this was the day.
Go back, yes.
That I went to the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, it's really crazy. And I remember I was actually signed up to do a guitar lesson, and I completely forgot about it during this process. And I'm actually going up. This is after they told me that I'm going to be on the team. I'm going up to meet with the special teams coach to figure out, what we run, everything, the process of what the meetings are going to happen, what our calls are on the punt team. And on the elevator, he calls me. He's like, "Hey, you're supposed to be here for a guitar lesson." I'm like, "I'm sorry. I'm actually just signed with the Packers. I won't make it." And I met him years later. And he goes, "I thought it was a lie." He goes, "I thought somebody was pulling my leg." I was like, "Yeah, I signed with the Packers. Yeah, right."
That
stood
is
me
awesome.
up. So it was a crazy time.
You know, I really enjoy talking about the all-new Saracen Resort in Pine Bluff because it's an incredible place. With everything that Saracen offers, you'll enjoy every second of your time there. The facilities cover a huge area that was previously a soybean field. Nowadays, it's a first-class operation offering tons of fun. Enjoy dining in one of their 5 restaurants, including the Red Oak Steakhouse, which is destined to be known as Arkansas's finest culinary dining experience. The Red Oak features cattle and bison from the Quapaw's own herd in Oklahoma, and the meat is processed in their own facility, the Quapaw Cattle Company. The Saracen also serves their own Quapaw brand coffee, featuring beans sourced from more than 20 countries and roasted in their own ovens. And for beer lovers, the Saracen includes an incredible on-site microbrewery. From Little Rock, head south toward Pine Bluff and exit when I-530 ends. It's only about 40 minutes from Little Rock. Arkansas's Quapaw heritage since 1673. Well, Hog fans, if you're anything like me, there are few things more addicting than chips and salsa and cheese dip. It's a favorite of mine at every restaurant, and it's about to get better. Abuelita Maria is a longtime Arkansas-based company. They've been making fresh tortillas and tortilla chips in Springdale since 1994, and now they're announcing their newest creation, officially licensed Razorback-shaped tortilla chips. So be on the lookout at your neighborhood bar or restaurant for these Razorback-shaped tortilla chips. I've seen them, tasted them, and they are delicious and sturdy and look just like a Razorback. So just when you thought you couldn't love chips and salsa and cheese dip more, our friends at Abuelita Maria have raised the bar with fresh Arkansas-made tortilla chips in the shape of a Razorback. Learn more at abuelitamaria.com. Hey, Hog fans, want to get and stay connected to the Razorbacks? Hogs Plus is an original subscription content network where you experience unprecedented access.
We're going to do it our way.
And relive the greatest moments in Razorback history.
Do you believe in fairy tales?
It's the premium content you've always wanted, designed just for you, the Razorback fan. Sign up now at hogsplus.com. What's it like, Monday Night Football opener? You hadn't been in a game in a couple of years.
Hadn't played a game since that second preseason game down there in Jacksonville, which is different when you're talking Monday Night Football, getting on there. All the cameras. Interesting was Aaron's first start too.
They wait to see Aaron Rodgers debut as the starting quarterback for the Packers. They will not wait long as the Packers.
So all the cameras are on him, and I'll never forget. I kind of had my head over in the corner, and I was just thinking, it's like, this is going to be a cool experience. And all of a sudden, I feel this guy pull me. I'm like, what are you doing? I look up and there's a camera. And then I look at him. He's just smiling ear to ear. I'm like, thanks. And that kind of just transitioned everything. It's like, hey, just have fun with it. And we were able to do that.
But Aaron Rodgers, big night, goes across Lake Michigan to play Detroit next week. A winner in his first National Football League start. 24-19. Green Bay gets it.
Was it surreal playing that first game at Lambeau?
It was. It was a division game, Minnesota, his first start. You get to go out there. I mean, you get in the moment of a game, and everything kind of works itself out. But like the pregame stuff, you're going out there and you kind of see everybody coming through, and you're like, I'm really here. And you're like, it's just such a special moment. It's hard to explain, but I've made it. You don't know how long you're going to make it at that point. You don't know if the other guy's coming off injury later or what's going to happen. But at that moment, you're like, I'm here. I'm getting to live my childhood dream of playing on Monday Night Football.
From that point forward, how many more times was your career in question or doubt, or was it every year? Or
so I always approached it was every year. I actually approached it was every game. You never knew what was going to happen. You see guys getting hurt. The year we won the Super Bowl, we had 17 guys going IR that year. So you see guys in those locker rooms that some of them never play again. And so you see that process, and you just really take it 1 week at a time and try and do your best. Make sure your performance is good. I had one snap in practice that was over the guy's head, and the coach looked at me and goes, "That's your one." And that was my one I did in practice my whole career. So, but that's the truth behind it. Is you get one and that's it. But then as I moved forward, I think it was like 6 or 7 contracts I signed in those 10 years. So there was nothing like really long term. We had the lockout year after the Super Bowl that really didn't know when the season was going to start, but you had a full off season. You just did it on your own and be prepared. And then I got into 2015. I'm in a contract year, and we go to Oakland, which Oakland was the last stadium I needed to hit all 32 stadiums, and I tear my ACL. First play of the game. My first snap, go out there, and I tear my ACL. No clue what happened. I just knew my knee hurt. I'm kind of sitting there, what's going on? I walk over to the trainer, like, hey, give me a couple of Advil. My knee hurts. So I go sit down, and it kind of bugged me the whole game, but I still stayed in, snapped, ran down the field, and luckily didn't injure it worse. Went home, flew on the plane, couldn't get comfortable, was still in pain. Next morning, I was like, something's wrong. So we did everything, did an MRI, and sure enough, popped my ACL 2 games left in the season on a contract year. So, a lot of emotion comes out then. You're like, okay, is my career over? You don't know, and they're not going to tell you. Ted Thompson actually sat down at the table as I was fixing to leave to go get surgery that week, and he's like, hey, just so you know, he said, I never believe anybody should lose their job because of injury. He said, you hang in there, and he said, you'll have an opportunity coming back.
He's the GM?
He was the GM.
Yeah.
And so we move into 2016. I had my knee surgery, and then I'm basically gone come March. I have no contract, so I moved back to Arkansas, and I'm working out and rehabbing there. And they set up that, the team pays for the rehab. You're going to the doctors and set it up, but no conversation with anybody. No teams. My agent hadn't heard anything. We go all the way through preseason again. Training camp's over. I'm literally laying on the couch holding my son, just watching NFL Network, and I get a call, and it's the Packers. And I had their number in because long term. And they called and said, hey, how's your knee? I'm like, it's good. And said, I'm ready to go. And it was right at that 9-month mark, post-surgery. And it's like, we want to bring you up, but don't tell anybody. We're going to just you come up, and we're going to work you out. Go up there, work out. We do a lot of running. Said, make sure my knee was good. Do some snapping. And they said, how you feel? I said, good. And they said, okay, we want to work you out tomorrow. See if there's any swelling along the way. Did the same thing the next day, and then I signed. It was kind of crazy, it was LSU in Wisconsin, so Aaron knew I was in town. I told him we go to the game there and, just kind of get back in that field. And it was the first time I got to watch a game in Lambeau, from a box, which was interesting, but it was a good college game, and then signed with them and then had a good year that year. One time I was like, well, why don't you come down to Arkansas? He said, what time are you leaving? I said, 3 a.m. He said, okay. So I showed up to his house, pick him up, and he's playing video games. I'm like, did you sleep at all? And he goes, no. Like I said, so I'm driving the whole way, right? So he drove down with me. And
you and Aaron Rodgers became really close in your time in Green Bay. How did that come about? You mentioned your first game and him trying to lighten it up for you, but how did you guys become such good friends?
It just happened. I mean, our lockers there was a little hallway about in between you and I. He just came over and introduced, said, hey, my name's Aaron. I said, hey, I'm Brett. At the time, I didn't know this, that, that was Brett Favre where his locker was. So I'm sure it was a lot of like, hey, wait a minute, there's another Brett right here. It's kind of weird because he kind of looked at me kind of strangely, but we just kind of started talking, and, you just that friendliness and being real, that's the biggest thing with everybody. Is the more real you are, I think the more friendships you're going to have, the good ones. And we just did. And so we were like, hey, you want to come over and watch football? You want to come over? I have an interest in guitar playing. So we started doing that. And then it kind of transitioned to the next year, hey, let's room together in training camp. So we did that so we could play the guitar and throw water balloons and, just kind of goof off. And it just kind of grew every year.
The final snap of Super Bowl 45. The Green Bay Packers have won the Super Bowl.
How would you sum up your NFL career? I mean, you played 10 seasons, 152 games, playoffs 8 times. You got a big giant Super Bowl ring right there on your hand. What Super Bowl number was that?
45.
So you had, a storied football career, but it's an unknown story in a lot of ways, until you share it with others, which to me is just, it's another example of how life doesn't necessarily go like maybe you dream about it as a kid.
Right.
But it also does, sometimes it does, but it also doesn't mean that there's not a great life to have.
Exactly. No, absolutely. And Green Bay is 100,000 people. Everything makes up, it's more than 100,000, but the Green Bay city limits at the time were just 101,000. So, I mean, everybody's focused on that football team. You go to the supermarket, people knew you then, but I'd go to New York, they know who Aaron is, they knew who Charles Woodson was, but they didn't know a lot of the linemen, and it was always funny because even now people don't think I was as big as I was. They're like, no, you couldn't have weighed that much. And I was like, even I've heard Aaron and I've heard linemen say, you weren't that big. There's no way you're that big because people see it on TV and they just, you're in cleats and helmets and everything else.
How big were you?
I was 260. Yeah. But, there's a lot of people who are like, there's no way. You're like, how's that possible?
And you're how tall?
I'm 6'2".
Yeah.
So, and it's transitioned now they want faster snappers because they can't hit them anymore. So now we've got some skinnier guys so they can run down the field. The game just constantly is moving. But then I look back of not even just the Super Bowl, obviously that's memorable, but, a Hail Mary in Detroit, playing on Thanksgiving. One year we got to do Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. So, I got to be that key focus that I remember. That's what you do on those holidays. You have your family deals and then you're watching football and you got to be a part of those, which you can't take away. I'll always be able to have that with you.
Off we go on Thanksgiving 2011. It's foggy outside. We're under the roof at Ford Field. Down to the field.
Let's look back for a second on being a Razorback. More people probably realize who you are now than maybe when you were playing as a Razorback. What were some of your fondest memories of playing at Arkansas before you had this 10-year NFL career?
Well, my first memory was going to Texas.
And now Arkansas has defeated Texas 38-28 as the ball clubs race onto the field to congratulate one another.
Winning that game down there in Texas that nobody thought we were going to do. And then my senior year, we had such a remarkable year when College Game Day came. We got to go to the SEC championship. We won the SEC West. And a lot of people don't remember that. I remember talking to students at the time, like, man, we really are good.
Oh, boy, it's picked off. Here goes Antoine Robinson, and he will score.
The crowd was there at that Tennessee game, and you're like, wow, this is a good football team. And you look at those teams and the games we were able to win, even my senior year, like the Auburn game, going down there, there's a lot of games along that way that nobody gave us a shot. And we were just able to pull it out and sometimes in a big fashion.
That's relatable to current day, to past day. It's something about Arkansas getting overlooked a lot and then being able to shock people or pull off amazing feats, and the fan base rallies around it. What is that experience like as a Razorback? That passion and that pride and the fan base, and when you're better than people give you credit for.
I think it goes with your senior class. I think that senior class was really leading that run out there because you see everything in the hog walk, you see everything along the way. You love the crowd, but you can tell the fans that are behind you when they're showing up and they're cheering you on after a loss. Like, hey, you played hard. That's the ones that are those true hog fans that are just got your back no matter what, and you really thrive off of that. You go out there and you're in Auburn, you hear a little section over there, and you hear the crowd just roaring, and you shut up 70,000 people. There's no better feeling. I mean, there really isn't, because they don't know what to do. They're all sitting on their hands. A lot of them boozed up, and they're like, what do I do now? I can't believe this team just came in here and did it. And that's the special moments that you're like, hey, I was a part of those teams. You were able to, had some big snaps. And, to me, a lot of people think of even the big snaps were on a field goal, the game-winning kick. A lot of people forget about, hey, that punt inside 2 minutes that we had to get off, that they rushed everybody and didn't get blocked. We didn't let them score for a touchdown. The coaches and the scouts and the people within the organizations, they know that. But your average fan doesn't really pay attention that much on that.
You did have some great games that you were a part of. I mean, the 7 overtime game at Kentucky.
That was great.
Firing. Can you believe it? We are still not done. 2-point catch, George Wilson.
I mean, it really was, because that was the year I wasn't doing field goal. And so I'm just doing punts. So by the time we get to overtime, I become a fan. I'm sitting there, I'm being ready in case that guy gets hurt, but you're really just watching and you're cheering on your teammates and trying to pick them up the best way you can. You're just trying to be a good teammate. I mean, at that point, you're just trying to be, nobody's listening to a snapper for motivation. You're just clapping and you're just being there the best you can.
Did you ever do anything at Arkansas besides snap?
The emergency center, but I never got in. You don't really get close to that in college. I got closer in the NFL. There was one time I was down, we had a team meeting, and we break off offense, defense, and then the 3 specialists, we kind of went down. We were going to go have coffee down the lobby, and they came running in there. It's like, hey, you got to go to the offensive meeting. So I take off sprinting. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, our center's not playing. I'm like, what? He's like, he's sick. like, you're up, you're starting. I'm like, whoa. It's like, what's going on? But I did all those drills that, that game. And I had snapped during the season, I snapped to the quarterbacks. So it was always for that case that we had a relationship for anybody that came in. So we kind of went through plays. And then luckily we got to the game I didn't have to play. But it was kind of a moment. It was like, oh, I'm fixing to play this. I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Yeah, unless you don't really want to be in that spot.
No. So
if you don't have to be. We mentioned your relationship with Aaron. He was actually one of your groomsmen. Mm-hmm. Look, you played in the NFL, and people want to talk about Aaron Rodgers. You're like, hey, I'm Brett Good. I played in the NFL. But when you have Aaron Rodgers in your wedding, did anybody even know you were getting married at that point?
Yeah, there was a few.
was it just like the everybody's thing, over there with Aaron Rodgers? We're gonna cut the cake now.
we had a bunch of players there. We did it on the bye week, so it was mostly players. You know, as a family, and then like close family and players up there. We had 41 people, so it was a small wedding. So everybody knew everybody and was just like, hey, we're here to relax. Like, we came back from the bye week. Everybody came back a day early and we got married. And that was the fun part is bringing teammates in. We got married in Lake Geneva. It's like we had rides set up for everybody. We had security in case somebody did come do that. So it was just a real quiet, just interaction with everybody. And it was a fun deal.
As a former Razorback, I like to ask everyone this. How do you hope people, if they know that you were a deep snapper, they know who you are, they know you played, how do you hope they remember you and what you did here?
That I did my job well. I mean, as a snapper, nobody knew me. That's perfect. That's what you want. I did have the one bad snap, my whole career at Arkansas, but that's what you remember is the one bad play. And still to this day, I remember it. Sometimes I wake up thinking, how could I have done something that week to prepare better? That didn't happen. And so that's the kind of thing that you do in an NFL, through the whole process. Like, you don't want to know me. I don't want you, it's a great article when you're playing, but I don't want to talk about it. It's just go on and do your job. And there's a lot of guys that are like that. Social media has changed that a lot. Guys kind of come out with their own personality a lot easier now than what we used to. But you kind of just wanted to go out there and do your job. And then I hope that's what everybody remembers.
When was the bad snap? I don't remember it.
Texas.
High pass over his head out of the back of the end zone, and it is 2-0. Just like that on a special teams.
That was Texas here when they came over here in 2004.
Was that the safety?
Yep. Snapped it right over our punter's head. Left hash right around the 20-yard line. So very start of the game. I think 18 seconds into the game.
So unusual.
Yeah.
You think you were like overhyped?
I guess hyped up. I mean, I was so confused after that play happened because you're like, what happened? It's not like I did it in practice throughout I hadn't done that. I think that was the first time I ever really snapped it over a guy's head my whole career. And so I was like, what happened? I have no clue what happened. And, you got to let it go. And so I took a moment, let it go, and you got to go back out there and perform. And so the rest of the game was good.
Well, that's your one.
That was my one.
That's always a fun thing to hear from a coach. Hey, that was your one.
That's your one.
Thanks again for joining us on The Hog Pot, a sport and story production in conjunction with Learfield. Please go to Apple Podcast or wherever you listen and subscribe, rate, and review The Hog Pot. I'm Bo Mattingly, your host and executive producer. The Hog Pot is produced by Bart Pullman. Episodes are engineered, mixed, and edited by James Youngblood. Our production assistants are Emery Kincaid and Evan Eccleston. Theme music for The Hog Pot is composed by Sweet 25. Our supervising producers are Kyle Parkinson and Chrissy Gilbertson. Special thanks to Brett Good, CBS, Fox, NBC, and ESPN. Support for the Hog Pod comes from First Security Bank, only in Arkansas, Sarazen Resort, now open in Pine Bluff, Abuelita Maria, the only officially licensed Razorback-shaped tortilla chips, and South by Northwest Hospitality. Visit them in Northwest Arkansas at Theo's, Eastside Grill, and the Southern Food Company. We hope you'll join us next week for another edition of The Hog Pot.